Hello, everyone. Welcome to the midterm one review. I'm going to first go over a list of all the topics we covered, the units in the book that we've sort of touched on and will be on the first midterm, and then I'll go ahead and do an example practice problem for y'all. So let's go ahead and get started with the list. So we started off with section 1.1, which, if you remember, was on real numbers. And in that section, we mainly covered the properties of real numbers. So the associative, distributive, commutative properties. We also talked about interval notation. And set builder notation. And we also talked about how to combine sets with union, intersection, taking away an element, etc. All right, the next section that we covered, section 1.2, which was on exponents and radicals. And in that section, we mainly focused on simplification and looking at specifically fractional powers of things. And those two skills will come in handy, especially once we get into chapter 2. And then the next unit was 1.3, where we covered polynomials and factoring, everyone's favorite. And the kind of main factoring methods that we talked about were the AC method, also called the guess and check method. We also talked about special factoring formulas. And of course, factor by grouping. And then we moved on to section 1.4, which covered rational expressions. And in that section, we mainly talked about compound fractions, and rationalizing the denominator. Okay. And then, of course, 1.6, which we covered 1.4, 1.6, and then 1.5, just because it kind of made more sense. 1.6 was complex numbers. And we didn't get too deep into those. We mainly focused on the arithmetic of complex numbers. So, you know, add, subtract, multiply, and divide. So we didn't spend too long on them. And then we jumped right into 1.5, which was solving equations. And section 1.5 is where shit really started to hit the fan. So we talked about, you know, solving linear equations, also quadratic ones. And, you know, specifically, we talked about the quadratic formula. We also talked about solving absolute value equations, along with fractional equations, so i.e. rational and radical ones, especially with square root. And then, of course, lastly, we talked about solving equations with multiple variables. All right, and then 1.7 was on modeling and word problems. probably the trickiest section in chapter 1 for most students. So the kind of main word problems that we're focusing on in this class were simple interest. Oops. If only I could spell. Terrestrial. And then we also talked about mixture problems, everyone's absolute favorite. And then we also talked about time for a job. And then, of course, distance, rate, and time problems. And then last, but certainly not least, section 1.8 was on inequalities. And this section built off a lot of section 1.5. So the kind of inequalities that we learned about were linear ones, quadratic ones, fractional, more commonly called rational inequalities. And then last but not least, absolute value inequalities. Now, an important note, inequalities are on homework 4. So homework 4 isn't due until after the midterm. It's not due until the Friday after the midterm. But it does have a couple of problems that cover material that will be on the midterm. So problems, I think, 1 through 5, which are a couple more word problems and then some inequality problems, those will be on the midterm. So while they're not going to be due until after the midterm, I recommend you go ahead and take a look at those problems and try to do them as preparation for midterm 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into our practice problem examples. So I want to go ahead and let's first do a mixture problem. And the problem I'm going to do, we're going to do homework 3, number 4. Yes. So homework 3, number 4, if you remember, or if you have it pulled up in front of you, it was like an evil sorcerer needs to drink 90 gallons of evil magic tea every day to stay magical. And then you want to poison the tea with exactly 4% dilution of poison. And so the question's asking, how much poison do you need to slip into the tea? So a lot of people had a lot of problems with this. So if this one was tricky for you or you got it wrong, don't worry, like you're not alone. So that's what I'm going to go over right now, and hopefully this will kind of clarify like the sort of process to set up these mixture problems. So while not all mixture problems are this way, basically any mixture problem in this class is always going to be, there's going to be 3 sort of pots or buckets that we're working with. 2 that we're combining and 1 that we're trying to get to. And so it can be helpful to like draw the 3 out, you know, the first 2 plus added together equals the last one, and then kind of label them with what we want them to be, or like what our objects are in the problem. So here in this problem, the first object we can recognize as, oh, we've got 90 gallons of this magic tea. So we know that one of them is going to be the magic tea sort of pot. And then we also have some poison that we're trying to add to the tea. So the second one is going to be poison. And then, of course, you mix magic tea with poison, you're going to get poisoned tea. Okay, so now we need to figure out what to put in these little bubbles. So the magic tea, we know that there's going to be 90 gallons of it. Now the question then becomes, what the heck do we put as the concentration down here? Like, what is the percentage supposed to be? Now, you have to remember when you are looking at the percentages on the bottom part of these buckets, you want them to be percent of all the same thing. And what I mean by that is you don't want to put like, you know, 3% water and 2% juice. They need to either be both water or both juice. Otherwise, the problem setup doesn't work. But of course, in this case, we don't have water or juice. we have tea and poison. So then the question becomes, which one should we put down? So the trick is going to be, we want 4% poison in the last poison tea. So this is going to end up being 4% poison. So these all need to be in poison. Magic tea doesn't have any poison in it before, when he's trying to drink it. This is going to be 0% poison. And poison itself is 100% poison. Now, we don't know how much poison we need to add. That's what we're trying to find. So I'm going to put X gallons for the amount of poison. And then for the final volume over here, all we need to do is add 90 plus X. 90 plus X gallons. Now, if the way I got this set up was a little confusing to you, that's okay. I recommend you reach out to me via email or come into office hours. We can definitely talk about it. So remember that the general sort of way to get an equation out of a drawing like this is you've got your percent times volume plus percent times volume equals percent times volume. And so in this case, we've got 0% times 90 gallons plus 100%, which is going to be a 1 for 100% times X gallons equals, here the percent is 4, so we write 0.04, 4% times 90 plus X gallons. And of course, so now we can simplify. 9 times 0 goes away, that's just 0. And then 1 times X is X. So this goes to X equals 0.04 times 90 plus X. I'm going to go ahead and distribute the 0.04 into there. And so we get X equals 90 times 0.04 is going to be 3.6 plus 0.04X. Then can subtract this to move the 0.04X to the other side, and you get 0.96X equals 3.6. Then we divide both sides. X equals 3.6 divided by 0.96, which if you do out the math, it's going to be 3.75 gallons. So this was the correct answer for that homework problem. Now, if you're on the midterm and you have a mixture problem like that, and you're like, I don't know what the heck 3.6 divided by 0.96 is, it's okay to leave it in an unreduced fraction like this for the word problems. So this right here is okay for midterm. All right, beautiful. So I hope that this clarifies the process for doing mixture problems. Again, if this still didn't make a lot of sense to you, please come to office hours. I would be more than happy to help you through it.